Tēnei au ko te urua manu ko te aitanga atiki. E mānuka e kahika e matakahi ahu mai te koanga tapu atea I te whare o te mānuka I te whare kura o manu kapua. Tēnei au hoatu nei hokai au wai whanāringa. Hiko ia te whetū, hiko ia te marama, kei te whai au ki te ao mārama. E rā ia te mātauranga te pākaru mai nei he ururu tau, he ururu matua. He ururu tawhito ki e nei pukinga ki e nei wānanga. Ki e ki ai te tohinga nuku ki te tohinga rangi ki te wai o tua ki te wai whakaika. Ko te wai ki e nei tauira, he wai tapu, he wai nui, he wai ora. I kaua wai ka pōru tuka mānunu ki te makopu taurarangi, he ariki, he tupua. Tā whaki nui a he matākina mai rā te kuku o tuai nuku o tuai rangi ki runga ki au ki tēnei manga o te akamatu e tūnei. Nā au ko wāhia roa ko rā tāku tū whakararo ko whakatau pōtiki, ko rongo mai ko au ko Ngāti Whātua. E kauri tū au he matakahi ki te aro o reo kia tika, o reo kia rere, o reo kia Māori. Te kaha kia au he kahatua tini, he kahatua mano, kāpute ki te whai au, puta ki te ao mārama, tūturu e rangi e tui honei, tūturu e papa e takoto nei, ka whakamau ai kia tīna, haumie, hui e, tāi ki e.
Ka mihi kia koe, e kingi mō te karakia. E mihi ana kia koutou katoa, kua tū hono mai ki tēnei hui. E nā kau nui ana tātou ki tēnei kaupapa, te tiaki taio. Nō reira, kia kaha tātou I roto I ngā mahi. Ko Michelle Kennedy tēnei e mihi atu nei. Tēnā koutou katoa. So a big welcome to everyone on the call with us this evening, and thank you, Kingi, for that beautiful welcome. For those of you who I have not met, I am Michelle Kennedy, founder of Auckland Climate Festival, and I'll be the host for this evening. It's an absolute honour and privilege to be opening this festival. After months of hard work and long hours by our team, our event partners and our supporters, we have finally made it. You'll agree with me that this year is a crucial year for climate action. When we were establishing the festival earlier this year, we knew that COVID was a real risk to in-person gatherings and that the model needed to be resilient in the face of disruptions like these. I'm so relieved to see the festival going ahead and that climate action has not taken a back seat despite the disruptions that COVID has caused. When we set out this year, we had 3 key goals. The first was to celebrate climate action and the incredible mahi already taking place. We knew that in Auckland and of course all across Aotearoa, there is loads of work already underway, but it's not always clearly linked to climate action, nor always brought together. What we've seen through the platform and what we hope to see over the coming weeks is that it has really helped bring people together, bring together much of this work and these organisations who in their own way are making significant impact and who should be celebrated. The second goal was to unify and empower people around a message of hope, particularly to our youth, to show them that genuine impact-led action is being taken and that we all do care. Let's face it, climate change is real and it is heavy. It is unjust and it is emotional. I'm even feeling that right now, but we do need to act. I wanted the festival to be able to carry both the reality of the current situation with the hope of the future and hope in humanity in parallel. I wanted each and every one of us to feel empowered to take action and enabled to do so. Rather than the doom and gloom messages that we frequently see, I wanted to ensure that we focused instead on solutions, embracing innovation, taking a holistic view of climate action, and indeed being brave and bold in our endeavours. And the third goal that we set out to do was to help bring society together to amplify and accelerate climate action. One part of this was motivating climate leaders. With COP26 just around the corner, we needed to motivate our leaders to be more ambitious and put the wheels in motion to reach the targets that were set in Paris. Civic movements such as ACF are one of the most powerful means to do so. Providing a platform gives not only our climate leaders, but each and every one of us the opportunity and the responsibility to own it as kaitiaki. What I learned during my time with London Climate Action Week was the power of the collective. It was very clear to me that we did need a whole of society response to climate action. The truth is we do need to take bold and ambitious action now, and we need to move in the right direction together. And a festival that brings everyone together in a consolidated period really helps us to do that. To quote a friend who is actually joining us tonight, this year was really about casting the net out and seeing what came back. We had pretty little time and little resources to get this off the ground. And of course, it's a new concept here in New Zealand. So it's been really amazing to see what has come back and what really matters to Aucklanders. It's been neat to see groups starting to self-organise, relationships forming that may not have before, and the cross-promotion of each other's events and initiatives, together building more visibility for this cause. I did want to acknowledge that this is just the beginning, and there is huge opportunity for this to grow, for it to include a wider range of people and groups. There are many more individuals and organisations who may only be learning about the festival now, and many of you on the call might be in that position, or who we have spoken to who are unable to participate this year, given the timeframes, but are very interested in being involved for next year with longer lead-in time. I'm really excited about building on this year's momentum and the foundation that we've set, and working with all of you to ensure that this becomes a regular fixture in the calendar each year, where we can carve out time, take stock, reflect on what we have achieved, learn from one another, and harness our collective energy as we continue to move together in the same direction. And on that note, before I introduce my first guest, who will be sharing his thoughts on how the government is stepping up to this challenge in the build up to COP, I would like to start by acknowledging a few people without whom ACF would not have been possible. So first, to our amazing team who have put a lot of time and effort into this: Lena, Bella, Hannah, Sian, Lewis, Mike, and Harry. We're a small team, but we've done this. Your efforts have shaped the festival and have ensured that we're all here today. To our partners, Ngāti Whātua Ōrakei, Whakatūpu Aotearoa Foundation, Foundation North, Auckland Unlimited, Auckland Council, Vector, Smash Delta, Waste Management, No One Studio, Tonkin and Taylor, Martin Jenkins, and I'm almost there, Humanitics. All of you have made an amazing investment, and you've really set the foundation for a lasting legacy for our city. So thank you for that. And a special thanks to Vector Lights in partnership with Auckland Council, who are generously lighting up Auckland's Harbour Bridge in the festival colours to coincide with tonight's launch. Of course, the festival wouldn't be a festival without our event partners, and I'm really pleased that there are now over 65 events hosted in collaboration with over 80 partners. You're a mix of incredible individuals and organisations who are leading the way, working hard for our city and for our country. To our local advisory panel, Ian Short, Pete Bernhardt, Alec Tang, Helen Mani, Yi Petrus, and those providing mentoring from abroad, Nick Mady and Chris Lubkman. Thank you for all the guidance, encouragement, and the laughs along the way. And a special thanks to Mike. Believe it or not, for those of you who have met Mike, he does actually have a full-time job. He's dedicated almost every evening and weekend over the past 6 months alongside his job to get this off the ground, between fundraising, testing the website, organising tonight, and providing many words of wisdom. You know this wouldn't have happened without you, so thank you. Okay, so let's get on with this evening. What a lineup we've got. We've got James Shaw, the Minister of Climate Change, Nick Mady, founder of London Climate Action Week, Ben Morley-John, joining us from Sydney, representing Smash Delta. We've got Simon McKenzie from Vector, our Mayor, Phil Goff, and last but not least, Chloe Swabrick, talking with our passionate Wahine Toa, Min Ann Tran, and Rebecca Tregoning, and helping us balance out the gender and the average age somewhat. I'd also like to acknowledge Minister Seo, who is in the audience tonight, and Minister Mahuta, who unfortunately could not make it, but sent her apologies. So without further ado, to a minister who needs no introduction to this audience, James Shaw, our Minister of Climate Change, over to you.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Good evening. Look, I first of all just wanted to acknowledge Ngāti Whātua Ōrakei for partnering in this and for hosting, and Kingi for your introduction. Thank you so much for that. And particularly Michelle, I don't think, you know, when you put together an event like this, you're the person who thanks everybody else for their participation. And so I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for your leadership and your vision in putting together the Auckland Climate Festival. I got asked this morning, and I am often asked this question, why should New Zealand take action on climate change, given that we're just 5 million people, you know, we're a small economy, we emit less than 1% of the global total of emissions. And my response to that is, well, we have the same number of people as Los Angeles City. And if what you're suggesting is that Los Angeles shouldn't take any action on climate change because it's too small, then what you're suggesting is that perhaps Chicago and New York and Houston also should not take any action on climate change. And of course, what that means is that the United States shouldn't take any action on climate change, despite the fact that it's the second largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world. My point being, everybody needs to take action, no matter how small you are. If you're a country like New Zealand and we emit less than 1% of the global total, there are 90 countries in that category, and collectively we add up to 30% of global emissions. So small countries, when we come together, when we act in concert, can make a huge difference. In fact, more of a difference than China, the European Union, India, or the United States on their own. And you can apply the same to Auckland. Auckland, of course, is a third of the population of Aotearoa. And you have within your city boundaries all of the challenges that we have in the whole country. So electricity generation, distribution, and efficiency, industrial heat and industrial processes, transport, buildings, urban design. You've even got some forestry and some agriculture within your city boundaries. And so what you do matters, and it covers the entire breadth of the climate change challenge. And just as Los Angeles and all those other mega cities matter to whether or not the United States is able to meet its targets, Auckland matters hugely in terms of the journey that we as a country are on, more important than any of the other cities. And I think that you've got both the challenge that comes with being a very large city like that, but also the opportunity and the resource base and the incredible people that you have to be able to lead on climate change and to make a huge difference there. Now, coming up very soon, as in within the time period of this festival, the government's going to be coming and talking to you and to other New Zealanders around the country about some of the key policies and ideas that should inform the emissions reduction plan that we have to have in place by about the time of next year's budget in May. And the emissions reduction plan is a requirement of the Zero Carbon Act. It's a strategy not just for the government, but for the whole country. And that is where I'm really hoping that you are able to find some time to get involved over the course of the coming weeks as we come and talk to people about what our plans are. So the Climate Change Commission last May gave us a real challenge. They said, look, here are what we propose your emissions budgets should be between now and 2025, 2030 and 2035, and laid out a general pathway. It's our responsibility now to fill in that detail and to say, well, here's how we are intending to do it. The government, of course, has an incredibly important role to play in creating the conditions and a supporting environment for others to take action, and kind of key policy settings, both within individual sectors like transport or energy or agriculture, but also right across the economy and across society. But we also can't do it only by ourselves. We know that businesses need to take action. Iwi are really in the lead on this all over the country. And we've got communities and cities like the ones that you represent, youth organisations, sports clubs and businesses are really taking a huge amount of action here and want to and needs support. So one of my questions to you is, what are the things that you think need to happen from organisations that you're involved in, and then what kind of support do you need from government in order to facilitate that and to make that happen? I think one of the things I get a little frustrated with is that this conversation can trend towards the individualistic. You know, that if only everybody changed out their cars for an EV or a bicycle, or if only, you know, people ate a bit differently or lived a bit differently. But we are all creatures of our context, and we can only take so much action without the environment around us supporting us to do that. And so we need to be able to provide that support and that enabling environment. And I'm very keen to hear from you about what that is. Michelle talked a lot about hope. And I remain hopeful that it is not too late for us to make a difference, and for us to bend the curve of our emissions downwards over a sustained period of time, so that we stay within that 1.5 degree temperature threshold. And I think that hope comes from the knowledge that we're taking actions that make a difference, not just my own individual actions or in my family, my whānau, in my community or my business, but the actions that we are collectively taking as well. And that's why I think initiatives like this are so important, and why it's important that you work with each other and that you form the contacts as a result of this festival, in order to enable that to, in order to enable your own actions to find root and to find common cause with other people as well. And I say that again without saying it's all on you, right? Because it really isn't. It's on all of us, and in particular us in central government, to be able to provide that. But we want to make sure that people are able to have that sense of being in action, doing things that make a difference, knowing that those things make a difference, and linking up with others who are also making a difference, so that we can see that collective action and get that hope out of it. As Michelle said, I'm off to COP26 in Glasgow in a few weeks' time. I'll be heading off in the first week of November, and I'll be gone for about 10 days. Now, this is an incredibly important conference, because there's been such a distraction from the climate change challenge and from that emergency that represents because of COVID-19. There is a real risk that the Paris Agreement does fray around the edges, as some of the tensions that have built up over time may be allowed to boil over. That's why it's so important that countries like New Zealand are there to stand with our Pacific Island neighbours and partners, to amplify the voice that they bring, and to provide a platform for our own Indigenous people to talk to others around the world about what is needed over the course of the coming weeks and months and years as we face this challenge. So when we're there, of course, I'll be running into people who are part of the London Climate Action Week. And I'm again just really hopeful that you are able to kind of hook up with other cities like London and others who are doing kind of great work around the world. That kind of ground up action is as important, if not more important, than some of the more kind of top down actions that we're able to take in government. So I want to thank all of you for participating in this. I want to thank all of you who kind of sweat blood and cry tears of frustration often as you're banging your head against a brick wall of change, but things are changing, and I just really want to thank you for your leadership on this. So tēnā koutou katoa, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Tēnā koe, Minister. Sure, that was really encouraging for us, and yeah, thank you for kind of giving us a bit of an overview on the emissions reductions plan and how we can contribute to that. And yeah, we're really looking forward to seeing what you take to COP26 and representing us there. So thank you. I'd like to now introduce our next guest, Nick Maybe, who is based in London and generously woke up at the early hours over the weekend to have a chat with Mike about London Climate Action Week, COP26 and more. Nick was the person who first actually planted the seed in my mind about setting up this festival while I was working with him on London Climate Action Week, and has been a mentor of mine as we've been getting established. So it's a real pleasure to hear from him tonight.
Kia ora anō, Nick. It's a pleasure to have you joining us from London. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to see the festival kicking off so brilliantly.
Yeah, it really is. So currently you lead E3G, a European climate change think tank. You're also a London Sustainable Development Commissioner, a friend of COP26, a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Energy Transition, and you continue to lead London Climate Action Week, which you have since its inception in 2019. What would be great is to actually start by having a chat about the power of collective leadership and action. From my perspective, at least, with COVID-19 and other crises holding leaders and the media's attention, it has felt as though climate action has taken a bit of a back seat. Obviously, you're involved with the preparations for COP26, and with that coming up, climate action seems to be coming back into the frame. I understand that this year is all about raising ambition. Can you tell us a bit about COP and the journey that the parties have gone on to get where they are today and where you see it going next?
Yeah, so you're right. This is not, this is the first of a new type of COP. You know, most of the previous big meetings, big 5-year meetings have been about negotiating treaties, but obviously we did that in Paris 5 years ago, 6 years ago now. So this COP is about implementing the treaty and increasing our ambition. So it's kind of a delivery and ambition COP. And to be honest, even without COVID and all the other things going on, I think countries have struggled a bit to respond to this. Their negotiators want to negotiate, but while there are negotiations, and actually some of them are really important, it's really about bringing ambition towards the place. So we're kind of inventing it as we go along. And one of the things is building momentum from the bottom up. And I think that's where the power of events like yours and others are so important. Firstly, to show people care and to show the momentum. And I think the big marches we just saw across Europe, 150, 100,000 in Berlin, in Rome, you know, it's starting to build that. We'll hopefully see that in Glasgow. But also people talking about the impact climate's having on themselves. And I think that was one of the big things this year that started to fold attention back on climate, was the impacts across, to be honest, the rich world. Yeah. Climate coming home in Canada, in the US, in Germany, in Japan, and in China, countries who perhaps thought they were protected, thought they were rich enough to deal with the weather, but have been surprised at how vulnerable they are. So that's, you know, coming into COP, we've got that big expectation from the public, the real impacts hitting. The question is, can countries put enough ambition on the table to convince people that this process is working and is going to keep them safe?
So speaking of ambition and COP and bringing it home, you know, it really is a series of kind of multilateral political negotiated positions. So when it comes to actually delivering on those commitments at home, sometimes, you know, we find that we can be divided on how to move next, and we can risk stalling. And I think that sometimes we have. So, you know, reflecting on your experience, what can our leaders do to really kind of crowd in noise and accelerate on the ground action that actually unites communities and brings them together?
Well, that is the kind of magic of these events, because actually the fact that we have this now kind of regular rhythm where we say, how are we doing? How can we do more? How can we help protect other people? Gives a space both for leaders to have to kind of make a decision and say what they're going to do, but also for people to put pressure on them and then to explain to people what they need to do. So it connects this very abstract global discussion to the most grassroots piece. So in very practical terms, around the world, we're working with coal campaigners who are challenging their governments to say, you know, let's make coal history. That's what this COP's meant to be about. That's what the COP president said he wants. You know, stop that last coal plant you got in production in Turkey, in India, in South Africa. So for all of the sounds like it's a long way away, actually, these COPs give the legitimacy in place for people to come forward and demand things from their leaders, and leaders to explain and bring people together and say, look, we should do this. Everybody else is doing it. This is part of a global movement. It's not just us on our own. So it's very human. At its heart, this is a very human process about people making promises to each other to keep each other safe. And you can dress it up in big diplomacy and everything else. But if it doesn't work at that emotional level, from the negotiating room right down to the street, then this whole process isn't working. And that's what we've got to make visible in events like Auckland Climate Festival and London Climate Action Week, to connect people to these high-level processes and back again.
That's great. So often we hear that 2021 is a crucial year for climate action. In your view, why is this? Why is it so important this year?
It's pretty simple, really. It's that the science has got worse. We've got less time to achieve climate safety than we thought, and we've got to hit kind of steeper thresholds, keep temperature at lower levels in order to protect the majority of people as much as possible. And if we don't make big cuts and promise to make big cuts and progress this year, there just won't be any time left, and we'll be committed to extremely dangerous temperature rises. So that's why this year is so important, to give us the last chance for us to stay below certain temperature thresholds. And we really actually don't know what's going to happen if we exceed them. And it's not the end of the game. We can't, we won't stop trying to stop it, but it means we've passed some thresholds which really raise the danger to everybody and may push the Earth systems into some tipping points which we can't recover from.
So kind of pulling everything together, you were talking about kind of giving local leaders kind of legitimacy through COP to hold their kind of domestic leaders to account and get things going. I'm really hearing a sense of a need to really mobilize communities from the ground up from you. And of course, that's something that we're really wanting to do through Auckland Climate Festival, is really concentrate that noise, the activity, and build momentum. And look, obviously, Michelle drew the inspiration for Auckland Climate Festival from London Climate Action Week, which you founded and when she worked with you. What can you tell us about that journey and how it's accelerated climate action in the UK?
So it's been a 3-year journey since 2019, and I suppose a few things which we learned was, firstly, there's a lot more people doing a lot more than you think. So I thought I'd lived in London for 20 years working on climate. I probably know a quarter of the people now involved in London Climate Action Week. There's such a diversity, and just uncovering more and more people who don't talk to each other enough. So the second thing was, there's a lot of fragmentation. I mean, London's a big city, but I think everywhere people don't understand what others are doing. But when they come together, they get huge confidence to be bolder, bigger, connect the dots when they're in one place. So that's the other journey. And then once you get past that first stage of kind of building confidence, people getting profile, understanding each other, they start to do real things together. So out of the first couple of years of London Climate Action Week, we now have a London Climate School Summit that brings all the kind of thousands of schools together in London working, who had like hundreds of different programs on climate. Now they're coming together, not just schools though, also universities and skills training colleges, which now, and that's now going to connect to some work. We've brought all the professional bodies in London together to talk about how the professions have to change. And now they're talking to universities about the universities changing to provide a new professional. So, you start by motivating, then you join dots, and then you start to build totally new networks. And that just shows and brings the whole power of the community together. And I think the last thing I'd say, when we went around, I talked to 80, 90 organizations with the idea of London Climate Action Week. And the real thing they said two things. One, we want to talk about the global, but connect it and root it in the local. Because if we can't show we're doing this ourselves, how can we be involved in the global conversation? But secondly, they said, we want to be outside the bubble, beyond the people who usually talk about this. And that's when we started talking to artists, musicians, restaurateurs, people working on local food banks, gardening clubs, and suddenly found out that actually people were like, oh, you mean we've got something to offer and our staff can come into it? And like, yeah, no, it's not an exclusive club. So again, I think that openness, and we started working with the London diaspora, with South Asians, with Africans and elsewhere. And just it's an incredible piece that suddenly people felt they had permission to be part of this solution. So it wasn't just a terrible thing happening over there. It was something they had agency over and they could contribute to. And I think that's been the most powerful piece, because suddenly then it suddenly cut down this issue to size, and it felt like, with this collective, this whole society approach, we can actually deliver something meaningful, and we're not just all feeling on our own, struggling with this enormous problem which seems so hard to tackle.
A real sense of kind of empowerment leading to motivation. Look, that's all really great stuff, and thank you for all those insights. But before we wrap up, I wondered if we could jump back to COP 26 very briefly. So, you're on the ground, you're embedded in the conversation. It's mere moments away, really. Could you provide a bit of an outside-in perspective on what you think New Zealand's role is in COP 26?
Well, New Zealand has always been quite an important broker in the talks, particularly for maintaining environmental integrity and perhaps bridging the gaps between some of the the bigger blocks and between the rich and the poor world. And that's a role we really need to see. We've got a chance of a really powerful COP, but a lot of things have to land in Glasgow, and there's a lot of complexity. And there's still a lot of distrust between rich and poor countries, which I think New Zealand's got a core place to be. And to be honest, there's still a lot of people trying to bend the rules so they can sell greenwash both countries and companies. So we'd like to see New Zealand, as well as coming forward, obviously, with its own domestic action, play that brokering role between countries, but also really stick up for environmental integrity and stop countries over-claiming for actions, particularly on areas like forestry, which aren't true, and make sure we don't build distrust in people. That everything that we put on the table, countries, companies, anybody puts on the table at Glasgow has to be real. Because if people start believing it's fake, then we lose trust. And without trust, back to the beginning, we don't create that sense of common purpose. And I think New Zealand's always been a critical player in the environmental integrity group, always been a critical player in that area. So it's a small country, but in these big talks, smaller countries like Switzerland, Norway, New Zealand always play some really critical roles to kind of, as I say, kind of lubricate the deals that the bigger countries can't do when they're stuck. So hopefully you've got a great Prime Minister, and I think she could do a great job at Glasgow to make the whole collective effort work.
No, thanks for that, Nick. It's really nice to hear that as a Kiwi, obviously. And thanks for joining us all the way from London, and all the very best with COP. And make sure you say hi to our Minister, James Shaw, when you're there.
Brilliant, and good luck with the festival. I'm sure it's going to be amazing, and we'll be tweeting you out all over the London Climate Action Week social media channels as well, just to make sure you get as many people as possible turning up in the middle of the night London time.
Awesome, thanks for that, Nick.
Oh, thank you so much, Mike, for that. There is certainly a lot to reflect on, but yeah, really great to hear about the importance of trust and indeed New Zealand's role despite our size. Just so you know, I also sat down with Nick a few weeks ago for a chat, which is now up on our website if you'd like to hear more on his reflections and insights in the lead up to COP. Next up, I'll invite Ben Morley-John from Smash Delta, who is a fellow Aucklander, but is joining us live from Sydney. So we won't hold it against him. His accent has changed slightly since we moved there. We've collaborated with Ben and his team to develop an interactive space exploring the themes of the festival.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, kia ora, hello from Sydney. I got to say, as an expat Kiwi, I don't get to hear karakia very often, and thank you so much for that, Kingy. That sent chills down my spine. That was really special. Tonight, I'm coming to you from Gadigal land, which forms part of the Eora Nation, and I'd just like to take the opportunity to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging.
No mai, haere mai, Ben. It's super exciting to have you with us tonight. When we first spoke about our kaupapa several months ago, we both agreed that technology has a significant role to play in driving climate action, in helping inform us to make better decisions, and also to help a story to support the behaviour change that we need to see. And you and your team at Smash Delta are leading and using data for good, particularly in the transport and the smart cities space. So it'd be great to start by hearing a few thoughts on this and perhaps sharing some practical on the ground examples of how you've done this through your recent work.
Sure. So at Smash Delta, we're mathematicians, engineers, designers, strategists. We're a really broad team, but with a singular focus, which is how can we use data to improve the world around us? So, yep, we've got a focus on transport and smart cities, and we've been driving a range of government initiatives here in Australia. So this has included architecting the 30-minute city strategy for Greater Sydney, executing a range of machine learning and AI public transport projects, and advising the federal government on the emergence of mobility as a service. So this is the idea that the movement of people and goods will become this transparent and interconnected market. For the 30-minute city, we worked with government to create a public transport equity measurement for Greater Sydney, really tackling how we could enhance public transport access for underserved communities and using data to fill in those transport deserts and better plan for the future. And really at Smash Delta, we've got two core beliefs. One, we believe that data and artificial intelligence actually belongs to everyone. Doesn't matter who you are, we all have a stake in our technology future. And secondly, we believe that equitable access to sustainable mobility systems is both a critical driver to social cohesion and a key driver of climate action as we switch to public and shared transport. So we know this shift will massively reduce carbon emissions, and it's our mission to bring business, government, and the public on a journey to make that future a reality.
Well, it's really inspiring to hear about how data is being used with integrity and helping our leaders put equity and social outcomes at the centre of decisions, and of course that it's also helping accelerate climate action at the same time. And for us in Auckland with transport emissions, for example, it's super cool to hear about what you're doing in Australia in that way. And I recall when we had our first conversation, which wasn't actually that long ago now, you were really excited to hear about what we were doing with ACF, given the alignment of our values.
Yeah, I was really excited to hear about the whole ACF platform. We're really keen to get behind ACF 21 because we're passionate about climate action, not just as a way to save our home, but as an enabler for a new generation of technical innovation and as a driver of community equity for the people of Auckland. And back when you walked me through the vision, sort of the themes for ACF, what really struck me was how it's being established as a platform designed as an ecosystem for different ideas, gathered from different people, from different walks of life, all to be channeled in the same direction with some really consistent language there. And so from my perspective, it's clear that ACF has been set up to be inclusive and accessible, with a very clear vision to drive real meaningful change. And the big one from my perspective is this idea of meeting people where they're at, to weave them into the story. And beyond this, it's really clear that your vision is tuned to creating and measuring some real impact for climate action. And that's something we too are focused on at Smash Delta. So super proud to be a part of this, Michelle. Going back to when we started collaborating with you, you had 5 themes that you wanted this whole thing to center on.
Yeah, that's right, we did. So just to run through those themes for everyone that's on the call, they were developed to bring the festival together coherently, given the scope of what could be organised by our event partners was so diverse, and to help provide a direction of travel, linking in with the work that was already done in Te Tātaki a Tāwhare, Auckland's climate plan, developed by Auckland Council and the Kaitiaki Forum. So our first theme, collective visions, speaks to the idea that there are different worldview and ideas coming together to shape the future we want to be living in. So, the key question really is, what is the vision or the visions of the future that are informing the decisions that we make today to keep us within a 1.5 degree world? And our second theme, systems change, then speaks to the fact that in order to get there, we need significant changes in the systems that underpin the functions of our society. So from transport, land use, finance, food, energy, and so on, they all need to undergo radical and really rapid change, like Minister Shaw said before. And at the other end of the spectrum, and related to that, is our third theme of individual action. Here we acknowledge that every person does have a role to play in climate action, as Nick mentioned in his talk before, not just climate leaders. And cumulatively, these do make a huge difference, and they influence the dynamics of the systems that we find ourselves within. But I can't talk about either of these without acknowledging climate justice. So our fourth theme is called Just Transitions. As we continue to make changes to our systems and the way that we live, we have a responsibility to ensure that this transition is done with equity and fairness at the centre. We must think laterally and consider the co-benefits of action and enhance equity and reduce inequalities at the same time as acting positively for climate, and that is possible. And finally, our fifth key theme we've called Beyond Tamaki. So this really speaks to the reality that Tāmaki Makaurau is part of a much greater ecosystem here in Aotearoa, and in terms of the responsibility and relationship with our Pacific neighbours that was mentioned earlier, and of course to the world. So in addition to these 5 key themes, we did also ask event organisers to consider how they would integrate mātauranga Māori and the voices of our youth where possible. We see these 2 aspects as being really critical for underpinning climate action here in Aotearoa.
So awesome. These are really great themes. It's been super cool to work with you on the story space to bring this whole thing to life.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's been really fun. But yeah, in the build up to the festival when we spoke, I was really excited about the idea of using a simple digital story space to bring these themes to life.
And I think, yeah, it's great to see some of these themes actually being mapped to the festival program as well, with real events and real action opportunities. So, you know, they're awesome, you're awesome, and the whole Smash Delta team can't wait to get amongst it in the coming weeks. Cheers.
Thank you, Ben. I'm really excited as well. And thank you again for the collaboration. It was a real pleasure to work with you and the team. And on behalf of us and Smash Delta, we really encourage everyone to check out the themes when you can via the story space on our website. And yeah, we're really looking forward to seeing how it can develop over time. So next up, I'm super excited to hand over the mic to some incredible wahine toa who through their kōrero will speak to a number of themes. Oh, apologies.
Okay, I found...
My Siri just turned on. Okay, so yes, so they'll be speaking to a number of the themes we've mentioned. We have Rebecca Tregoning, who is a student at the University of Auckland and volunteers for UN Youth as a promotions manager. The co-lead for CPSV Green Team, aiming to incorporate more eco-friendly practices into university living. We have Min Tran, a Year 12 student at Western Springs College, Ngā Puna o Waiōrea, and a member of the Waterwise group who promotes sustainability and climate conscious action within the community. And of course, Chloe Swarbrick, our Auckland Central MP. These wonderful wahine will be having a chat about the role of our young people, how we can overcome climate fatigue and red tape. So I will hand it over to you.
Kia ora, e hoa ma, ngā mihi te Ngāti Whātua and kia ora te Kingi. Thank you so much for the introduction. Stoked to be joined by these incredible young women, and I understand that my role is to ask them some questions, so we will get into just that. I have a question to begin with Rebecca. So Rebecca, the question that I have for you is, how are university organisations combating bureaucracy and apathy to actively push for a better future for the climate?
Kia ora, and thank you for the question. I would say that it's not about university organisations specifically, but there are some really passionate and dedicated individuals on the ground who are really putting in the mahi that we need. In terms of combating bureaucracy and red tape, I think young people are often viewed as a softer generation for wanting to not sit by the rules, not wanting to sit down and work through the red tape and the rules needed to bypass to enact real change. But the way that I see it and the way that a lot of my peers see it, if that red tape and those rules got us into our state of climate emergency right now, they obviously need changing. So it's as obvious to us as it is to everyone else that something needs to change. And I think, moreover, young people today have grown up in an increasingly online climate. I mean, as this very Zoom call demonstrates, and it is no longer possible to claim ignorance to climate change and ignore the devastating effects it has, particularly on poorer communities globally. With the whole world at our fingertips online, our goals as a society and as young people can no longer just be to protect what's going on our doorstep, what's going on our street. And there are some incredible young people on the ground doing that work. And I think through that work and through that passion, within a university space where many people are being able to formate their own worldview for the first time, I think that directly is combating a lot of the apathy that I think it is very easy to feel at a very overwhelming task.
Kia ora. I've long felt that apathy in general is a mischaracterization of the anger that young people feel about the situation that we have inherited. But thank you so much for your insight, Rebecca. Min, I have a question for you, and that is, what kind of role do you think that younger people can have in pushing for a better future?
I think that for young people, like, we should really, our role is just to continue learning and broadening our perspective and like understanding of what is going on in the world, because I think that we shouldn't, like Rebecca said, we shouldn't really sit back and pretend that everything is all right and everything's all dandy, because in this case, ignorance isn't really bliss. We can't. It's just going to end up in chaos if we don't. And I think that learning and broadening our perspective doesn't have to be something like too big that we have to like dive into the deep end. We can start off with like reading the news and understanding what's going on around us, or talking to people who are directly affected. Yeah.
Kia ora. I understand that there are some other questions here around climate fatigue and continuing to enable young people to make environmentally conscious choices. So do either of you want to take that?
Yeah, that was my question. I was like wondering how we can help young people overcome climate fatigue and like to continue making environmentally friendly choices.
For me? Yeah, cool. Kia ora. So I think when it comes to overcoming climate fatigue, it's actually, for me, best contextualized in understanding the way that my friend Carl McDonald puts it is, you know, we think about now in this kind of COVID world where every day we are having to make decisions that we're thinking about on so many other levels, this kind of 4-dimensional chess that we're not used to. We think about washing our hands, we think about wearing our mask, we think about, you know, staying 2 meters distance away from everybody. All of those kind of compounding variables that we're considering in every single decision we make, understandably wears you down and makes it really difficult because we haven't produced a system which enables those things to be defaults. So that's where I think that one of the most valuable things that we can try and do is shift our way of thinking away from just, you know, blaming folks for individual choices, particularly when they're not enabled with an environment that gives them those opportunities, and thinking about systemic change. Now, systemic change is something which is massively overwhelming as an individual person, right? You think about how, you know, how on earth are we going to deal with the oil pipelines or, you know, the gears of rubbish that are floating in the Pacific Ocean? The only way that we can deal with those things is through collective action and through realizing that these are fundamentally political problems. That is, they are all to do with the way that we have geared up the system, the rules, the regulations, the laws, the economic and financial systems to actually prioritize these things and to externalize the costs of them. So I'm very proudly a radical and noted online as a social justice warrior or whatever else comes with that. But I think one of the best ways to try and go about making that sustainable is to build kind of an army of a community around you, because no one person can carry the kaupapa alone. It's impossible and it's nonsense. And we have a tendency to sanitize and to whitewash history by thinking that that's what's happened.
I had a quick question for you as well, if that's all good. So obviously I spoke about bureaucracy within climate change, and I was just wondering what your opinion on that was. And from your perspective, obviously as a politician, why do you think that climate change is still such a politicized issue?
Because it's to do with power and it's to do with wealth. It's basically about hierarchy, it's about money. When we think about what's necessary to confront the challenge of climate change, particularly when we realize its intersection with social justice or inequality and the inverse, we come to realize that the people who are going to be hit the first and worst by climate change are those who are contributing the least in terms of climate changing emissions. Meanwhile, those who are producing the most in terms of climate changing emissions are those who have the resources to continue moving further and further away from the impact that they're having on the planet, further and further up, you know, the proverbial hill away from the rising sea levels. So we have to recalibrate that system because it currently incentivizes really perverse outcomes. And the best way to do that is to think about the just transition, not in the way that it's now being co-opted by certain people who are keen to perpetuate the status quo, but kind of greenwash this really quite perverse late stage capitalism, which, you know, as we know, is having some quite perverse outcomes for the mental health of particularly our younger people, as well as those inequitable outcomes that I was referring to before. The just transition, as envisioned by, you know, those unions at the front lines, those who are Indigenous climate activists, is about redistribution of power. It's about re-envisioning a system that enables us to live in a very hippie way of thinking about it, in harmony with the natural world. Because I think that we've got it wrong in the way that we think about climate change in the mainstream. We tend to think about it as though we are hurting the planet. And sure, we are in the short term, but actually what we're doing is harming the ecosystem that's necessary for us to survive. The planet will be here for long after all of us are, and it will regenerate and it will recuperate. We just have to make sure that we're living in harmony with it for as long as possible. So recalibrating that and realizing that the only way to get there is through collective effort. So thank you guys. Thanks so much for the opportunity to chat. I believe that we are now bringing back our hosts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for kind of landing that for us. There was again a lot to take in with that. A lot of really interesting thoughts, and it was yeah, cool to kind of hear about what's top of mind for each of you at the moment. And you talked quite a bit about systems change in there, Chloe. And we're very fortunate to have Simon McKenzie, the Chief Group Executive of Vector, with us tonight. We've talked a lot about how the festival creates a platform to learn about climate action in Tāmaki Makaurau. So I'll hand it over to Simon to share about Vector, Auckland's energy company, to share a bit about what they're doing to help us achieve a low carbon future for Auckland.
Kia ora katoa. Ko Simon McKenzie toko ingoa. Hello to you all, and I'd particularly like to acknowledge Ngāti Whātua. As Michelle mentioned, I'd like to just talk a little bit about what Vector is doing to support not only Auckland's climate future, but also New Zealand's climate goals. Energy is obviously a key part of Auckland Council's decarbonisation pathway and is increasingly critical for decarbonisation of especially transport. To enable decarbonisation, we fundamentally believe we have to transform the energy system. No longer what used to be the design methodology for the energy system in the past is relevant to the future. Our vision is to create a new energy future, and we've been working on this for some time. A few examples include EV smart charging trials, so that we can reduce the demand on the energy system rather than create new peaks, which ensures that not only people in communities, but individuals, businesses can actually have an affordable transition, one that means that we don't have to build as much infrastructure to enable that charging to occur, therefore making that transition more affordable. We're virtualizing our network with X. For those of you that don't know who X are, they're part of the Alphabet companies or Google companies. And with them, we're removing roadblocks to really understand how the networks have to respond into the future to enable integration of technologies such as solar, battery, EV charging, and again, build affordable networks. We're also trialling electric trucks through our on-gas business for city centre deliveries. And these are aligned with the aims of Auckland Council's zero emissions area to reduce emissions. We're working with AWS or Amazon Web Services in a strategic alliance, one of only 5 globally, and the only one in the energy sector globally, to build a new energy platform to provide advanced data services to parties who are looking to develop new products and services, other network operators, other infrastructure companies, to take the data from the energy system, overlay it with other sources of energy to make much smarter, informed decisions about the impacts of energy, climate change, and also how do we build solutions in the right areas. And something that we're particularly proud about has been our development and work with, I should say, Ngāti Whātua on their Kupe Street housing development, where we've provided solar and batteries to that development for their whānau, and further developments are currently hopefully coming through in that space soon. We've long recognised at Vector that this, and is working to achieve decarbonisation, has to be done alongside customer choice, affordabilities, and always delivering a safe and reliable, secure energy system. We need to complement existing energy systems with new technologies, and doing this means we spend less to achieve energy system decarbonisation, which is ultimately good for consumers and the environment. And this is not just in Auckland, but it's also for New Zealand, and also taking these solutions on a global platform. As I said, Vector's vision is to create a new energy future and accelerate the energy transition we all know needs to happen. Our collaboration with global partners such as Amazon and X is testament to the strategic alignment we have, and not only does it enable us to put these platforms at the forefront of what's needed in the energy systems, but create jobs and opportunities for many people in the tech sector and also in the energy sector. Vector Lights is a symbol of the energy transition. It's powered by solar, batteries, and around 90,000 LED lights, which consume significantly less energy. And this is really a representation to show where we're heading and an innovative, sustainable energy system. We're really proud to be part of the Auckland Climate Festival, doing our bit to help decarbonisation and raise awareness of issues, collaboration of different parties with ideas and solutions. We particularly hope you enjoy the Vector Lights as we light up the bridge to celebrate the Auckland Climate Festival. And I'd like to finish by thanking you, Michelle, and your team for the hard mahi to make this event happen in these challenging times. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Simon. Thank you so much for that. That was really interesting and cool to hear about the global partnerships in particular and how that's going to be affecting Auckland. And thank you again for putting on the Vector Lights for us this evening as well. We will show that in a moment. But before we do, it's a pleasure to introduce our last guest, Mayor Phil Goff, who has kindly provided some pre-recorded closing remarks and will officially open the festival for us.
Kia ora tātou, tēnei te mihi nui ki a koutou. I'm Phil Goff, Mayor of Auckland, and welcome to Auckland's Climate Change Festival. Can I thank Ngāti Whātua for providing the karakia, and also acknowledge Ministers Nanaia Mahuta and James Shaw for their comments. Recently, the Integrated Panel on Climate Change has stressed the need for urgent global action to reduce emissions. Time is running out. Here in Auckland, our council in 2019 declared a climate emergency, and since then we've been working hard to produce Auckland's climate plan to commit ourselves to the objectives of the Paris Conference to keep temperature rises below 1.5 degrees. There's lots of ways that we're doing this. We're looking at a more compact urban form that will produce less carbon emissions. We're looking at mode change, moving reliance on carbon-powered private cars to a much more efficient and climate-friendly public transport system in active transportation, walking and cycling. We've also looked at reducing our waste, and we're planting millions of trees to provide canopy shade, to green our city, and to provide carbon sinks. I want to thank all of those that have come together to organise this festival and those of you that are participating. I offer my thanks. It's my pleasure to declare the Auckland Climate Festival officially open.
There you go, we are officially opened. So thank you very much to the Mayor for those words, and yeah, as an urban planner myself, I'm very glad to hear that we're working towards a more compact city supported by infrastructure for active modes and public transport. And as the Mayor said, please do get involved in the festival, get stuck in. Thank you again to Vector Lights in partnership with Auckland Council for lighting up the Harbour Bridge. You can see it in all its glory at the moment. Thank you for bringing joy to us at this time. And so friends, let us be brave and remember that a thriving environment is a thriving society. Let's go as one. Nō reira e hoa mā, kia kaha rā tātou, toitu te taio, toitu te tangata, hoake tātou.